Last Thursday, Creature Commandos had its season finale, ending the series on a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes and starting the DCU on the best possible foot forward. How did James Gunn do it? How did he create such a successful show with characters virtually no one cares about? And the biggest question of them all, will this translate to the DCU? Personally, I think it will. James Gunn has set out to create a new cinematic universe for the DC Comics, and I think he's started it in the best way possible. By creating hype for something as small as a trailer to giving hope to the entire community of DC fans. And for me personally, I haven't been this hyped nor this hopeful for a superhero movie in a really long time. And that's because of two big reasons. Reason number one is James Gunn is taking risks. And I'm talking risks we haven't seen since the beginning of the MCU. In my last video, I talked about how the MCU was a gigantic risk that Disney was taking, using characters that almost nobody cared about. Now, James Gunn is doing the same, not only with unconventional characters, but in an unconventional medium for a cinematic universe. This show could have easily been live action. If you need proof, just go watch Peacemaker. But instead of doing this, James took a risk and made the show animated, which I think was a calculated decision. Not only does animation have less restrictions than live action, animation also has the ability to give us stunning visuals, the likes of which are just not possible in live action. And on top of all of this, I think James Gunn chose animation specifically for nostalgia. Let me explain. I think everybody knows that DC in its prime is animated. We grew up with The Batman, Batman Brave and the Bold, Justice League Unlimited. All of these DC projects are fantastic and animated. And for the longest time, it was a running joke that if you wanted a quality DC product, you would go for the animated films or shows rather than the live action. And that's why I think James Gunn did this purposefully. He wanted to show you exactly where his head was at. I think this paid off enormously. The show did extremely well. All the memes and the fun things that were coming out of it and getting to watch an episode every week, it was a very fun thing to experience. But in addition to this huge risk of it being an animated show and using characters no one's ever heard of, James Gunn takes it even further and takes another risk, showing us the main title characters. And by that, I'm talking about the big three. I want you to understand that in comic book media, this is actually really taboo. Having your main characters appear as side characters or even just background set pieces rarely ever happens. And that's because Marvel has been the big player for the longest time. If they're gonna get Robert Downey Jr. in the studio, they gotta pay him a lot of money, and he's gonna have a bigger role, even if it's just his appearance or likeness. Whereas in animation, these big name characters can appear and they can just act as set pieces to move the plot forward. Not to mention, most of the characters they've shown have not been cast yet, or at least not officially. In an interview, Alan Tudyk has basically said, if you voice a character in animation, you will reprise that role in live action.
James has said that in his DC universe, he wants the same actor to play the same character, no matter the medium.
So to show us these big name characters when no actor has been cast to play them, it's very risky. But it's a clever way to drive up hype. I know that I was geeking out whenever I saw Superman for the first time impaled on that spike. And not only is this a good way to drive up hype for your universe, it's a good way to show us where we are in the mythos. For example, when Cersei shows Amanda Waller the future, we see Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And what this tells us is that these are prominent heroes within the universe. They've already come out, people know of them. These aren't their beginnings, these aren't their origins. Now, the Justice League might not be formed yet, but these characters are well known. There's lots of little clues like this sprinkled throughout the show, like for example, Dr. Phosphorus and Rupert Thorne. All of these different characters are going to play a bigger role eventually, but it's so cool to see them in this show because it gives us concrete evidence that we are fully in the mythos. But it's also vague enough to keep the viewers guessing and to have things change later on that the viewers wouldn't even necessarily notice. Another thing I really loved about this show was the different representation of our heroes' cities. In the show, we are shown Metropolis, Themyscira, Gotham City, and Star Labs, to name a few. Home to Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and The Flash, respectively. And each one of these locations have a unique feel to them. They are all visually different and tonally different. It's almost like they represent the heroes that inhabit them. Unlike the prior DC movies where everything was in grayscale and just bland and bleak. These locations in Creature Commandos have character, they tell a story. And you'd be able to tell what city you were in if you lived in that universe. Which leads me to my next point. James Gunn is putting a lot of trust not only into these characters, but these settings. James Gunn is not solely relying on relatable characteristics, he's letting these characters have their own individuality. And this can be seen throughout the entirety of Creature Commandos. Every single one of the Creature Commandos has a different way of handling situations, they have their own personalities, they have their own unique thoughts and perspectives, and it creates a very interesting story to see. Hell, even their backstories are vastly different despite having the exact same endpoint. And calling back to my previous video, this is important because of course it makes the story interesting. It's what made the MCU a billion-dollar franchise and what I think will make the DCU a billion-dollar franchise as well. The amount of trust that James Gunn puts into all of his characters across all of his projects is extraordinarily apparent. James Gunn is a director first, but a writer at heart. He allows his characters to grow and develop naturally and in ways I'm sure he didn't even expect. For example, look at Rocket Raccoon in the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. During the first Guardians movie, Rocket didn't care about anyone or anything, he just wanted to get paid. And despite this, James allowed this character to show some empathy, have it bleed through. And by the third and final movie, Rocket has grown into his empathy, creating a complex character with real emotion. It's this innate ability to tell a story through your characters rather than with them that makes shows like Creature Commandos, that has a very short runtime of just 3 hours, feel so interesting. Again, even with this short runtime, we see such huge character developments between our cast, especially with the Bride. And she actually reminds me a lot of Rocket. And personally, I think this is the type of writing we can expect for the rest of the DCU, which of course makes me super excited about the future. I think James Gunn is the perfect person to be leading this charge, and like I said in my last video, if you have good direction, it will lead you to glory. And I think that's exactly what James Gunn is going to do. So yeah, that's it for this video. It's shorter, it's quicker. I was going to do the Ren Fair video this week, but it's taking a lot longer than I was expecting. Right now it's sitting at like 40 minutes, so it's going to be a pretty big project. But if you guys like this video, please leave a like, make sure to share it with your friends. Comment down below if you agree with what I said, or if you're worried about the DCU, maybe you love Creature Commandos, maybe you hated it. I want to know. Unless you hated it because there was a woman, then you just need to shut the fuck up and grow up. Also, before I go, if you want to see Jake, Liz, and I play some video games together, check us out at twitch.tv/geekweeklive. We play almost every single day. I'd love to see you in, and I'd love to interact with you live. But again, that's all from me. I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.